and welcome to the first ever episode of The Whole Tooth, the podcast that pitches your questions about sharks and their underwater world to leading experts in marine science and conservation. I'm your host, Isla. I'm a scientist, a scuba diver, and just an all-round shark enthusiast. I work with sharks and I will talk about them to just about anybody who will listen. So this podcast is like a dream come true. I just basically get to nerd out about sharks with the people who know them best. And we have some really special guests on this season on to talk about topics ranging from shark physiology to shark conservation to threats to shark movements and behaviour, and even careers in marine science. So I am so excited to finally share it with you. I'm also an education ambassador for the Save Our Seas Foundation, who bring you this podcast. And as it's our first episode, I thought I'd talk a little bit about who we are and what we do. So the Save Our Seas Foundation is an organisation dedicated to promoting the research and conservation of sharks and the oceans. And since their inception in 2003, they have funded an incredible 400 projects in almost 80 countries. Now, these are projects which strive for a deeper understanding and more innovative solutions in marine science, conservation and education. And one of them you are listening to right this very second. So if you'd like to find out more about the organisation, you can head to saveourseas.com or find us on Instagram on @SaveOurSeasFoundation, all one word, and Twitter on @SaveOurSeas. Okay, so without further ado, let's get on to our episode. So today's episode is a really fun one. We had a question sent in by Yuri, who is 10, asking, how do sharks do babies? So this episode will be all about the sharky birds and the bees, mating and reproduction. And I have two amazing guests joining me today to help me answer this question. The first is Jillian Morris-Brake, aka Bimini Shark Girl on social media. Now, Jillian is not only one of the nicest people you'll meet, but she is also a huge shark advocate with a really extensive and varied career in shark research, conservation, filmmaking and education. Jillian is a scuba diver and award-winning photographer and has filmed for the likes of the BBC and National Geographic, just to name a few. She is also the author of Norman the Nurse Shark and Shark Superpowers, and in 2012 Jillian founded Sharks for Kids, a non-profit focused on creating the next generation of shark advocates through education, outreach and adventure. Now, Sharks for Kids is a really awesome organisation and I would highly recommend checking them out, so I'll link to everything in the show notes. Our second guest is the equally wonderful and accomplished Jenny Bortoluzzi. So like Jillian, Jenny is a woman of many, many talents with a serious passion for sharks. She is an ambassador and virtual lessons coordinator for Sharks for Kids. And she is also currently studying for her PhD in the ecology of blue sharks at Trinity College, Dublin. And not only that, but she is also an underwater photographer, freediver and scuba diver. Now, these ladies really know their stuff when it comes to sharks, and I had so much fun chatting with them. So without further ado, let's dive in. Just to kick us off, where in the world are you right now? So Jillian, we'll start with you.
So normally I'm in Bimini in the Bahamas, but I happen to be visiting Florida for a little bit. So yeah, pretty close, but Bimini is home and it's a very sharky place, which is why I'm actually based there.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit about Bimini.
Yeah, so Bimini is the closest Bahamian island to the US. It's about 50 miles and it's very, very tiny. The top side doesn't have a lot, but underwater, it's one of the sharkiest places in the world. It's made famous, the Bimini Biological Field Station. So a lot of shark research, a lot of the things that we actually know about these animals has kind of come out of the Bahamas. If you're a shark person, you've probably heard of Bimini, maybe you've been there, or you've seen it on television shows, the BBC, Animal Planet, Discovery Channel. Every year, lots of TV shows are filmed there. Crystal clear water, lots of diversity and healthy shark populations. So it's really, really special. And if you want to see sharks or work with them, it's an ideal place to do that.
Yeah, it sounds like heaven in my opinion. And Jenny, whereabouts in the world are you?
I am currently in Ireland, in Dublin, Ireland, where I do my PhD at Trinity College Dublin. It might not be as warm or as crystal clear waters, but they are pretty sharky waters here. We get over 70 species of sharks and rays in our waters, just like in the UK. So there's plenty for us to see and study. It's really fantastic world underwater in Ireland, just like it is above water.
Yeah, absolutely stunning. And it's so nice to also rep cold water as well.
100%. Yeah, there are sharks in cold water.
There definitely are. One thing I like to ask my guests to kick us off is, what is your most memorable experience in the ocean? It's a very hard question.
I have to say mine is actually pretty easy because it was really significant. I was able to see a lemon shark give birth to 10 pups in the wild. Seeing her come into shallow waters next to the mangroves in Bimini and pretty much beach herself, get as close as she could, and then to watch the life of each of these little sharks, come out, attach to the umbilical cord, they fight off, and then kind of a little sleepy almost, and then it's like someone flipped a switch and they're immediately a shark and they swim into the mangroves and life starts. And just seeing that and seeing this animal that I think people think of as big and strong and powerful, so vulnerable and so little, really, really special and such a rare thing to actually see. So that remains probably the coolest thing I've ever seen, definitely in the ocean.
Oh my God, that's absolutely incredible. I mean, and it's definitely in touch with this episode too, in terms of what we're about to talk about. Jenny, how about you? What was your most memorable experience?
Well, that's a really hard one to beat. And my most memorable experience is probably Jillian's everyday experience in the ocean. But I was in Bimini a few years back, and I was out with the team at the Hammerhead location. It was early in the season, so we didn't know if Hammerhead would actually turn up. And I think for about 2 hours we were in the water chumming, having a go at the fish to try and attract a hammerhead into the area. And I was just about to give up and get out of the water and have a break. And I turned round to get onto the boat as one of the staff members suddenly shouted hammerhead. And I think for a moment I thought he was joking and making fun of me. But when I turned round, this big, beautiful, great hammerhead was coming down right below us. It was Medusa. Her name was Medusa. And she stayed with us for, I don't know, it must have been half an hour. And I went down, free dive down to see, to get closer at one point. And as I swam back up and pop up to the surface, I heard everyone shouting, behind you. And she'd followed me right up to the surface, and she was right on my fins. And it was amazing to have this huge animal come up and inspect me and say, what are you and why are you in my habitat?
Wow. Yeah. I mean, not everyone can say they've had a great hammerhead on their fins. Yeah. For sure. Oh, they're both incredible experiences. And I mean, both of you have had, so many more experiences than that, but there are definitely ones that stand out in our mind as particularly memorable for very different reasons. So you're obviously both incredibly passionate about sharks and the underwater world. And I just wondered sort of, where did that passion actually begin for you guys?
Yeah, so I grew up in Maine in the US, and luckily had parents that loved the ocean and would take me to the beach and spend a lot of time crawling through tide pools and snails and crabs, and anything was just exciting, and just loved that. And then my dad went to Florida every year for work, so I got to go with him, and I was 8, and we went snorkeling, and I got to see a nurse shark, saw manatees. But it was really, the manatees were amazing, but I remember the little shark. It was a small nurse shark, and just, immediately became obsessed. And I went home, got books, and started learning. And just, that moment at such a young age and getting to see that and just see the ocean in general, lucky enough to spend time there. I think that just really set off a lifelong journey of wanting to know more. And then the more you find out about sharks, and then deciding that I wanted to focus a career on that and study them, and which kind of evolved into then different aspects of working with sharks. But yeah, it started at a young age, just absolute fascination that never faded.
Mine's very similar. I at the other end of the ocean though, I grew up on the shores of Brittany in France, and every summer my parents would take us to the beach, and while my brothers were like playing in the sand or whatever, I was always bent over the rock pools with my net, trying to find every little creature that lived in there. And I've always been very passionate about nature and animals. I think my parents really instilled that love for nature in me. And so once I got old enough, I gave scuba diving a try, and it just kind of like went from there. My love for sharks actually comes from the film Shark Water by Rob Stewart. I watched it at about the age of 13, and it just stayed with me. And I went off after seeing it. I went off and did the same. I read books and watched more documentaries and found out more about them. And I think the first wild shark I ever saw was actually a cat shark. So these little sharks that most people don't realize are actually sharks. But when I saw it, I like was so excited to see my first shark in the wild. So
yeah, just something about sharks, isn't there, that just sort of lodges in your mind when once you've seen one, you can't sort of let them go. Like, you have to go and find out as much as you can about them, and they just sort of really get under your skin and become part of your life. So talking about those experiences kind of in early childhood, how did you then, how did that transfer into a career? So let's kind of talk about your individual career journeys. And you're women of many, many, many talents. So I'm just going to read some of these off. So Jillian, you started off with a degree in marine biology. You then became a research assistant, then went into, as a dive guide, you worked as a scuba dive guide, and then transitioned sort of into underwater photography and filmmaking. So I kind of just want to talk a little bit about that career progression. So, you went from, the research side into the filmmaking side, and how did you make that transition? Was photography always something that you did kind of alongside the research, or was it something that sort of came afterwards?
Yeah, so I grew up with a mother that was always taking photos and always had a really nice camera. And so I remember in high school doing some black and white, experimenting and loving the camera. And so when I started doing internships and field work, I had a camera with me. And like everyone has their phone now, but I actually had, a real camera, and was documenting what I thought was just interesting and cool. And was, graduated and was so excited, and then realized that marine biology jobs are hard to come by, specifically if you're trying to work with sharks, super competitive. And I wanted to be in the field, but, navigating that journey that we've all been through and every marine biologist goes through is, okay, great, now what? How do I make a living? How do I support myself? And so, as I was traveling in the camera, and I started showing people photos and videos and seeing the reactions, like, oh my gosh, I didn't know you could do that, or how beautiful is that, or how cool is this shark? And was getting to go and work in some remote places. I worked in a part of Western Australia that's pretty remote with some very large tiger sharks. And I had looked at doing a PhD there, and had just kind of explored my options, and then just kind of really felt connected to showing people this world, and really felt something. And you guys can probably relate to this if you've shown someone a photo of a basking shark, or any shark that you've been in the water with, or you've seen or taken, and it starts a conversation. And it's usually one, unless you're talking to other shark people that already kind of get it. But if you're talking to your family, your friends that don't do this kind of work or haven't experienced it, it's really incredible, the conversation it starts. And I just found that fascinating. And so that kind of led me into, okay, well, if I can use these photos and videos and show people, and then, okay, there's an opportunity for work with this as well, because I'm comfortable in the water. I'm a diver. I'm comfortable around big animals. I've spent a lot of time with big sharks, and now I know how to use a camera. I had to learn the underwater part. It's very, very different than using a camera topside. And I didn't take any classes. That was learning, on the fly in the field, just simply by shooting. And so, yeah, it was kind of just a natural transition. And that I really fell in love with the idea and the experience of sharing those images and video and seeing the power. I know it's cliche that, an image says, speaks volumes, speaks 1,000 words, but it's very, very true. And when you can show that to someone and see their reaction and see how powerful it is, that just, to me at the time, felt, I really felt connected to that and loved being able to do that. So it was a very natural transition. And then kind of then going back and filming and photographing the research, or, that I was doing, and explaining that story as well. Why are we doing this? Why are we working with this animal? Why are we tagging it? And kind of explaining. So was able to bring in the science back into it. And use it as a tool to explain to people why the work is being done. Why are we tagging this animal? Why are we have it next to a boat like this? Or why is it? And so, so it was just a really, really natural transition, and felt really connected to the power of it.
Yeah, so it almost kind of went full circle in a way. So you're able to bring the research back into it. That's so cool. And I think that's such an important message as well, because, for the majority of the population, their connection to sharks and how they find out about sharks is through film and is through photography. So it's super, super important. And then I guess another element of that is education, which brings us on, really nicely to Sharks for Kids. So can you tell us a little bit about, what Sharks for Kids is and how it came about?
Yeah, so the next step was, so I had the science experience, a science background. Now I had this media, and I had met my husband shark diving, and he was filming for all these TV shows, and we were filming together. And when you work with sharks, I had a lot of friends. My mom's a teacher. Hey, can you come into the classroom and talk? Can you give a talk about sharks or your experience? Which is amazing. And then a lot of people were asking, do you have an activity sheet? Do you have something to go with this? And at the time, this was 15 years ago or something, maybe more than that. So I didn't really find a lot that, there wasn't an easy way to find, here's this activity sheet to do after the talk. So I thought, that might be kind of cool. And so I sat on that idea. And then when I turned 30, I had been talking about it so much that finally my husband was like, why don't you just do something? Like, you're talking about it. Clearly this is important. And clearly we have the science background. We have loads of media content. And my best friend had just finished his PhD on tiger sharks and had done a lot of classroom visits as well. And so we'd all kind of believed that kids have this voice and they're excited, and you can get them interested, and we can give them facts instead of the misinformation that they're destined to hear about sharks. But if we can kind of give them the tools to navigate that, all right, then let's do this. And so it really came out of a belief that kids, if we give them the facts, we can empower and inspire them, and that they have a voice that's much more powerful than they realize. And that's the goal. The goal of Sharks for Kids is to create the next generation of shark advocates through education, outreach, and adventure. And we do that with free resources for teachers, students, and parents. Lots of interactive opportunities, classroom visits, a lot of virtual lessons. And when we can, we take students out to actually see sharks and participate in shark tagging.
That's incredible, and it's much needed, because we've talked for ages in conservation about having this kind of growing disconnect between the younger generation and nature. So any initiative that sort of helps to bring young people together with conservation and exploring their environment is so valuable. And so you mentioned, Jillian, that Jenny, you are an ambassador for Sharks for Kids. So we'll also talk about your research. But first, I just wanted to ask you, while we're on the subject, what does being an ambassador for Sharks for Kids entail?
It takes on many forms for different ambassadors. For me personally, it's doing exactly that, connecting with students all over the world and giving lessons and talking to them about sharks and sharing my love for sharks. And it's one of the best things I've been doing for the last few years. I absolutely love it. And I'm not just saying that because Jillian's here.
I appreciate that, but you are one of our, I have to say, I'm going to interrupt Jenny. You, like, the work that Jenny's done, and you can tell it's contagious. And it's really special to me to have ambassadors that just, you can tell, are so genuine and enthusiastic, and the feedback from teachers and students from that, it's really, really powerful. And Jenny is definitely, the work you're doing is incredible, and we love having you on the team. And I'm not just saying that because you're on the call.
Yeah, no one's obligated. It's just, we're just appreciating each other.
I love doing it because alongside my research, it helps me put it back into context and remind me of why I'm doing the things that I'm doing in my science, and vice versa.
Yeah, and that brings us on very, very nicely to your PhD. You actually did the segue for me, so thank you for that. But yes, you have so many roles as well. I felt absolutely exhausted sort of researching you both, just how much stuff that you actually do. So Jenny, you have, 2 degrees in marine biology. You're about to finish your third, so your PhD in elasmobranch ecology. But you're also on the comms team for the Irish Basque and Shark Project. You're also, the postgraduate rep for the Irish Ecological Association, ambassador for Sharks for Kids. You're a blogger. So I have many questions, but the first one is, all about your PhD. So, what is your specific PhD question, and, how are you addressing that question?
The work that I'm working on right now is looking at the diet of blue sharks when they are in Ireland. So blue sharks are seasonal visitors to Irish waters. They arrive around the end of May, early June, and they stay here until October. And the work I'm doing is investigating what they eat while they're here, and also what that means in terms of like their requirements, energy requirements, according to their what point in their reproductive status they are. So the sharks we get here are almost all female sharks, which is really interesting in and of itself. But depending on where in their reproductive cycle they are, they're going to have different needs for nutrients and for energy that they get through their food. So we're looking at the links between their diet and their reproductive biology, and also their physiology. So how fast they swim, is it optimal for the food that they're eating? So these are all questions that I'm looking into, and I'm using a variety of different methods, including like putting cameras on them, putting speed sensors on them, taking samples and looking at their blood and what's inside their blood. It's really cool, and it's been really amazing to be involved with, because it's not been done much in Ireland. Blue sharks are often thought as one of the best known sharks, because they're the most widely distributed species of pelagic shark, and the most abundant. But in Ireland, we don't know much about their behavior here. It hasn't been studied much, so it's been really amazing to be part of.
Yeah, that's such an awesome PhD. Every time I hear someone describe their PhD topic, I want to be like, I want to be doing that. I wish I'd done that. But I think that's also going to be a theme throughout this whole episode, is that, we think we know a fair bit about sharks, but we actually don't know much at all. So without further ado, shall we get on to our question?
Yeah.
The question that we have to answer today was actually sent in to us from Yuri, who is 10 years old. And she was asking, how do sharks do babies? Which I just absolutely loved as a question, and how it's phrased. But I think this is a question that, we could, even if we know sharks, we could all do with a refresher in, or if you don't know anything about sharks at all, it's such a massive and complex world, is shark reproduction, and there is so much still to learn about it. So I thought what we could do first of all is actually talk about, how much we actually do know. So this is potentially a more difficult question than it first appears to answer, because we don't know actually that much about shark, reproductive habits or mating behavior. And I just wanted to ask you guys, why is it that we know so little?
Yeah, so I think one of the challenges is when you look at studying anything in the ocean, it's vast. And access to it means boats, equipment. Yes, you can learn a lot in aquariums, and I think some of the reproductive studies definitely have utilized aquarium species. But it's the challenge that we see studying any sort of marine life, is that just the depth of the ocean, the vastness, access to it reliably, consistently, prepping for field work and funding to do that. Maybe you need to be on the water every single day to hope you see something, and we oftentimes can't do that. And so I think that's the challenge, that not just for shark reproduction, but in general. And then if you look at migratory species, where are they going? Where are they spending their time? And so that's a study in itself to then better understand, where is this reproduction happening? We know it happens. We see signs of it. It's obvious these species are surviving, so we know it's happening, but where, when, because we're not able to see it unless it's, certain species, nurse sharks, for example. There are places that we know, June is actually Happy Nurse Shark Mating Month. At least in Florida and the Bahamas, this is when they mate. And so they come in shallow water, so you're able to see it. It's been documented. Dr. Jeff Carrier and Wes Pratt, actually, studied this for decades. And it's probably one of the species we know most about as far as reproductive mating strategies. And it's simply because it's shallow water and we have access to it. But for the most part, deep sea species that migrate, go offshore, we just don't have access to it, and the time and the tools to be out there and to monitor it enough to probably see it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, some of these species, you're talking, they travel thousands of kilometers, or they can be thousands of kilometers deep. And so it's really hard to keep track of them. And at the same time, there's over 500 species of shark. So there are so many different answers to this question that we can go down. But of the shark species that we do know about, what does mating actually look like?
Yeah, so I actually was lucky enough to work one of my first shark projects was nurse shark mating behavior. So we were watching, observing, spent countless hours on a tower in the dry Tortugas off Florida, watching them come in. We had them color coded, so we had them identified, males, females. We knew individuals with color coded tags, and watching and seeing the mating behavior. And so I think sharks, because the study has been gone on so long, and we know that males do grab onto the females. There's not a lot of romance. There's definitely not, dinner in a movie. There's no romance. So they use their mouths. I mean, they can't really, nurse sharks do have more flexible pec fins, but not really flexible as they would need. So they'll actually bite on, flip the female, and then it is internal fertilization. So males use their clasper to insert into the cloaca of the female for internal fertilization. But it's with nurse sharks, you actually see avoidance behavior. So females will actually avoid specific males. They'll use rolling, they'll go into shallower areas. And then you'll see males working together actually to kind of corral and trap females as well. So I think a lot of images we've seen or videos of mating behavior, we know and can kind of infer from what happens with nurse sharks, because we see the bite marks from around the pectoral fins where they're grabbing and flipping the female, and it's pretty brutal. Like you see sharks show up, and I mean, they're cut up. They're pretty. It's pretty intense, and to see all the marks and the cuts and the scarring that happens.
It's a tough world for a female shark out there. Not sure I would like to be one. And that's not even the least of it. Claspers, when they insert their claspers into females, they'll turn their claspers inside out, and those claspers have spines along them which stop them from slipping out. So yeah, it's not I wouldn't like to be a female shark.
Yes, definitely. There's definitely not much romance going on in the shark world. But you mentioned claspers there, and I wondered if we could just explain to people that don't know what claspers are, what they are.
They're the shark's version of penises. They have two. They're extensions of their fins. And yeah, thank you. We actually have a basking shark up here in Scotland called Dangerous Dave, and he is named Dangerous Dave for his enormous claspers. So there you go. That's how you can ID. Sometimes how you can ID sharks is by the size of their claspers. But we do hear about animals kind of on land that sometimes have, things like courtship rituals. So, you might see a couple of birds doing some dances together, or, is there anything that like that exists in the shark world? I know we've kind of mentioned that they're maybe not the most romantic and might not kind of exhibit that sort of behavior.
I mean, one of the things for sure is you do see aggregations. They come together, and it may be just for mating. I mean, you think of scalloped hammerheads. You've probably seen the schooling scalloped hammerheads. Lemon sharks also aggregate, and because if everyone's in the same place, think of like the date increases your options for the date, finding a date, right? It's the dating pool, or their version of online dating or going to the bar. It's much easier if everybody's sort of so that, you know, in the same area. So that's definitely a behavior, you know, and you'll usually see it seasonally, and that's that you'll have, you know, hundreds, if not thousands, of the same species in an area, to make it easier to find a mate.
And some females, to increase their chances of having litters and genetically diverse litters, will mate with multiple males, and their babies can actually be from different fathers, which is really cool. But I think in some species, it's like everything with sharks, it varies. Some species do display some courtship behavior, others travel thousands of miles to find a mate. And in some species, we just don't know how they find mates. I mean, how do sharks in the deep sea find males and females of the same species? It's a mystery.
You mentioned there that some females, you know, have, you know, mate with multiple males, but there are cases where females actually don't mate with males at all. So I wondered if we could talk about the phenomenon that is parthenogenesis.
Yeah, parthenogenesis is a really cool process. It exists in reptiles and in plants. And a few years ago, I think it was in 2007, it was observed and proven in a captive shark. So that one was a bonnet-head shark. And the aquarium staff essentially came in one morning, and there were 3 female bonnet-head sharks in the aquarium, and they had never been in the tank with a male, and they were caught wild when they were only like small babies. So there'd been no chance, because some sharks are also capable of storing sperm for a really long time. So it's been observed in aquariums before where for a really long time sharks don't have any males in there and then give birth. But it turns out it's actually because they've stored the sperm for so long, which is also weird and wonderful thing about sharks. But in this case, there was no way the females could have mated with a male. So some scientists, I think Damien Chapman at the time did some genetic analyses on them and found out that they were a copy of the mother. So not a complete copy. In parthenogenesis, there are 2 ways of doing it. It's either a complete clone of the mum, or it's a half clone where the cell has split in half and only half the chromosomes pass on to the offspring. And in that case, it always ends up being daughters, because in the case of sharks, they have an X and a Y chromosome. And so when the cell splits, then only the X chromosome multiplies and becomes an offspring. So whenever you have parthenogenesis in sharks, it's pretty much always daughters that end up being born. And yeah, they're a half clone of the mother, and it's a really cool phenomenon that happens. We've observed it in zebra sharks since then. We've observed it in white-spotted bamboo sharks, in black-tip sharks, but most of our observations have been in aquariums where females have been isolated from males. So we don't know if or how often this happens in the wild.
Oh, fascinating. See, this is why I love sharks. There's just all these kinds of weird and wonderful things happen. You know, there's lots and lots of species of shark. There's too many to actually go into the details of each one. But there are a couple of main strategies that sharks take when it comes to actually giving birth to their young. So can we talk a little bit about those strategies?
Yeah. There are 3 on top of the parthenogenesis that I was talking about earlier. There are 3 main strategies for giving birth or reproducing in sharks. The first is just like us, giving birth to live babies that they will carry in their bellies in a placenta for over 9 months, 12 months, sometimes more. And once the baby is ready to get out, the pup is ready to get out, they give birth, and that is it. Now, there's no maternal care. Once they're out of mum, they swim away as fast as they can and they go and hide somewhere. So animals
go straight to teenage phase.
Yeah, pretty much. So species like lemon sharks, bull sharks, they are all live bearing. We say viviparous. And it's really cool, actually, because you can tell that a pup has just been born because they actually have an umbilical scar on their belly. So they heal really quickly. They don't keep them for their whole life like we do. We have our belly button. But they do, I think within a week they'll heal. But if they're under a week old, you can tell because they'll have this like little belly button on their belly, which is super cool.
That's super cute.
Yeah. And in some species, because they grow in utero, you actually see competition between pups in the belly. So one of the most famous ones is the sand tiger shark, where they will actually eat each other in the belly of the mum. So the strongest, essentially it means the strongest and fiercest pup makes it out alive, and the other ones get eaten up by it. It's a tough world for a shark from the moment, even before you're born.
Yeah, absolutely, from the get-go. Because I mean, we talked about, mating actually being not the easiest way of doing things. So when it comes to that, but actually even learn how to do that in the womb.
The second strategy is the opposite, is laying eggs, so oviparous. And it's really cool. A species like cat sharks, for example, lay eggs, or the Port Jackson, they all lay eggs, and these eggs are unique to each species, and they will tie them up in the seaweed, usually in the kelp, and they're really camouflaged, so to protect them from predators. And they'll grow in this egg, and when they're ready to hatch, they'll hatch and swim away. Now, it's really cool because these eggs actually then wash up on the beaches, and as you walk along the strand line and you look through the seaweed, you'll very often find them. So
yeah, it's so cool, and they're really distinctive as well. So they're quite often, they feel quite tough and leathery, don't they? And each different species has a different shape of egg, and sometimes they can have these really curly little, they look like little pigtails that come off them, and that's how they attach them onto the seaweed. Or I think, is it the Port Jackson shark that has it looks almost like a spiral, and they sort of screw it into spaces in the rock, which is just so cool.
And then the last strategy is kind of a mix between the two. It used to be called ovoviviparity. Now I think we refer to it more as viviparity via yolk sac, placental viviparity, aplacental viviparity as well. And that's kind of, so the mother will keep the eggs in her belly, so the eggs aren't as tough as they would be if she was laying them, so it's a bit more of a flimsy case because she's keeping them inside her belly. But they're not attached to the mother through an umbilical cord or through blood vessels. They are purely attached to their yolk sac. And once they are ready to hatch, they'll hatch inside the belly. And they'll still stay in the belly for some time after that sometimes. And they'll feed on unfertilized eggs, for example.
So we've talked about the main strategies to do babies, if you like. But how long does it take for a baby shark to develop?
We've said before, it really varies among sharks. And for some species, we have no idea. We don't know. But the species that have been studied, the average is usually 9 to 12 months. Going back to the nurse shark, that's one of my favorites, and I feel like deserve more attention than they get. Theirs is about 5 or 6 months. Then a lot of reports say that the frilled shark, which is a deep sea species, can have a gestation period up to 3.5 years.
Wow.
Which, I can't even imagine. I have an 11-month-old daughter, and 9 months is a long time. If there's some species of dogfish as well that have quite a lengthy, longer than the 12 months as well. So it varies. And again, it's with over 500 different species, there's still so many of those species that we don't actually know.
How frequent actually is mating? So how often do sharks reproduce?
Yeah, consequently, they can't have babies that often. So I think some species do have babies like maybe twice a year or lay eggs twice a year, but most of the time it's at least once a year, if not more. So it's really varies from species to species, like everything. But they have long reproductive cycles and low numbers of babies usually per reproductive cycle. So
Yeah, which to give it its fancy scientific term is K-selected, if I remember correctly.
yes, exactly.
Yeah. And so other, sharks, we haven't actually mentioned this, but sharks are types of fish, and other types of fish breed very differently.
Yeah, and that, yeah, exactly. It's pretty much the opposite of other types of fish, where they try and invest as much as possible into a low number of offspring. In fact, even blue sharks, which are one of the ones that that give birth to the most babies, only give birth up to I think it's a maximum of 130 or 140, something like that. But most of the time it's less than 100. And that seems like a really big number. But when you compare it to salmon or cod that lay thousands of eggs, and the sunfish, I think, is in the millions even. So, so it's really a completely different ballpark.
Yeah, and you mentioned the sunfish there. Just as a very quick note, if anybody listening hasn't already seen a picture of a baby sunfish, they are the most adorable things I've ever seen. So give it a good Google. So sharks tend to invest quite a lot of effort in their young, and they quite typically don't have lots of young. So one of my questions was, do sharks then look after their young after they've left the womb?
So they do not. And this is, always sounds terrible. And people's reaction are like, oh my gosh, how can they do that? But babies, whether if a shark lays an egg case and she deposits it, she's not sitting on a nest like a bird would and taking care of it. So when that little baby hatches out, it's on its own. And then in the case of live birth, with the lemon shark I mentioned, they'll actually have a hormone in their body that's secreted to suppress their appetite so that they don't turn around and eat their own young, and they'll swim off and start eating again, looking for food after they've dropped the pups. But these little sharks are immediately they're on their own, and we inserted a tag in the pups, and one of them within an hour got eaten by a barracuda. So yeah, and she gets as close as she can to that protective mangrove area to try and allow them to get to shelter, but she's not corralling them or staying around and guarding them, and they're not hanging out, they're not nursing, they're not learning from mom. They're fully on their own, but because they're so fully developed, sensory systems, the ability to eat, to hunt, all of that, they're really just a perfect mini version of mom and dad. So they're capable of taking care of themselves, but there are absolutely a lot of predators out there that will, be looking for these little animals.
It's absolutely phenomenal. Like, I mean, because obviously a lot of what we learn as humans is so much from our parents. Our parents teach us so much, or the people around us, whereas sharks are truly just, hitting the ground running, or hitting the ground swimming, should I say. Yeah. I have heard about shark nurseries, and I'm sure some people listening have as well. So I kind of wondered, what they are, because in my head, I just picture like a little kindergarten for little baby sharks, which I don't think is what they are.
You're not exactly far off. I mean, really, it's a safe place. So when that, big female lemon got as close to the mangroves, and if people don't realize that mangroves have their roots right down in the ocean, and it has these cool kind of tunnels and places for lots of baby animals to hide out. You see lots of reef fish, turtles, conch, lobster, and these young sharks, these newborns, and they'll spend their first few years of their life in that nursery area. It's shallow, so there's large predators can't actually physically get in there. There's lots of food, and what you see is it's really they're not learning to read and write like kindergarten, but they're learning how to be a shark. They can practice hunting. In the case of lemon sharks, they're social, so they might hunt with one friend or hide out with another. So they have their buddies. So it's a really a safe place for them to find food, learn, and grow before they venture out into deeper water and face larger threats and larger predators.
So you've got a species there that's very long lived, takes a long time, invests a lot of energy in its offspring. So I'm just interested to know, is that a successful strategy, or, does that make them quite vulnerable?
Well, it must be a successful strategy because they've been evolving for 400 million years and they're still here today. So it clearly has some form of success. However, it does indeed make them vulnerable, especially to human effects. So whether it's fishing pressures or any sort of way that we are killing them directly or indirectly, it means that it's really easy for us to get over the point where fishing them is sustainable, because sustainability would be if we were fishing them and they were able to reproduce and replenish their populations at the rate or faster than we are fishing them out. At this point, we're fishing them or killing them in such huge numbers that that's not the case.
They're slow growing, they mature late. So if 25, 30 years for white sharks, they have to survive that long just to then be able to reproduce. So it does show us why they are so vulnerable to overfishing and these threats that exist, simply because of that process.
Yeah, it's a successful strategy if we take humans out of the equation, I guess.
As is most often the case in nature, yeah. I think. So the question that we had to answer today was, how do sharks do babies? And I think we've answered it as thoroughly as we possibly can. We've covered all the basics there, right from how sharks meet each other in the first place, how mating actually occurs, right through to the sort of gestation process. How do they grow the little baby sharks? And then right to how they give birth. And, I was going to say how they look after them, but it's more of how they look after themselves, I guess, after they've left the mother. So just to bring it back to you guys, so I just wanted to ask, what is next for you? What are your plans moving forwards?
Yeah, so I'm always working on new content, new ways to reach students, new interactive engagement. We've got a lot of new video content coming out, so I'm really excited about that. I think it's an amazing way for anyone to learn, but I think it's a way for, makes learning fun and interesting and engaging for students. And it's, technology is allowing us to study sharks in different ways, but it's also how we can learn and how students can learn. So we're constantly working on new content. I'm really excited to get back to in-person events and classroom visits. I miss that. It's been weird. And so I'm really, really excited, specifically, getting back to the schools in Bimini and getting students out on the water. That's so important to me. And so, yeah, I'm excited to get back to that and continue to do more and provide more of those in-person opportunities for as many students as we can.
I have a year and a half left of my PhD, and I'm currently sort of getting into the full-on fieldwork season of like my main project on blue sharks that I was telling you about. And one of the questions I'm trying to answer is actually relevant to the conversation. I'm trying to figure out what the reproductive status of blue sharks is when they come to island. As I said, we get mostly females. Are they pregnant when they arrive? Are they pregnant when they leave? Are they mating before they arrive? Are they mating after they leave? All these questions are questions I'm trying to answer, along with what they're feeding on while they're here. So that's really what's coming up for me in the immediate. After that, I really hope that in the next year and a half, I'll have finished my PhD and be a fully fledged doctor. Doctor of Sharks. I really like the idea of being a doctor of sharks.
Yes, that's a super exciting title to have, definitely. And I have Lynn as well. So remembering back to finishing my PhD, not to ask a PhD student what they're planning to do afterwards, because your brain's already so full of kind of what you're doing at the moment.
Who knows what comes afterwards. I hope that I'm able to stay in the shark world and to keep doing something along the lines of what I'm doing here. And I also can't wait to see where Sharks for Kids goes, and how much we can grow in the next few years, because it's really been such a joy to be a part of. So I can't wait to see how many more people, how many more students we can reach with all of our lessons.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of, if people wanted to get involved with Sharks for Kids, how might they go about that?
Yeah, so we have a website that has all of our resources for free, links to our videos, to our webinars, crafts, all of that. You can book a virtual lesson, eventually an in-person lesson if we have somebody in your area. And that's the sharksforkids.com, and it's the number 4. So really has links to all of our information, our social pages. We're pretty active on social media, from sharing what we're up to, but also just general shark facts. And we have fun trivia and just general knowledge and updates about what's happening in the world of shark science as well. So we kind of try and offer a little bit of all of that. So yeah, and that's kind of where you can check out and learn more about the programs and opportunities available. And it's all right there, and it's very easy to connect with us. And you can just shoot us an email through the website as well if you have questions.
And finally, we have come to our final question. If you could be any species of shark or ray, what would you be and why?
I would have to say the great hammerhead, just because they're my favorite animal and I'm absolutely fascinated by them. And I think I do a talk with kids about shark superpowers and their adaptations, and great hammerheads are really, I think, the top of the superpower list, from having that cephalofoil, that large head that's filled with more ampullae, their vision, their superpowered near 360 vision. So I just think seeing the ocean from their perspective, we know they're migratory, and they're so beautiful, so amazing. So I think, I would just, to experience that, they would definitely be the shark that I would want to be.
I think I would really love to be a deep sea species. Possibly maybe like a pocket shark or something like that, because I'd love to see what's down there. Now, I am a little bit scared of the dark, but I reckon if I've got glowing pockets down my side to scare anything away, then I'd be good.
Oh, that's so funny, because that's also my species. That's the species I would be. So I would definitely be a pocket shark, but purely for the reason that I would like to know what it's like to have glow-in-the-dark armpits.
Yeah,
I think that would be really cool.
Exactly. And yeah, I'd love to see what's down there. There's so much unexplored areas in the deep sea that it would be so interesting to see.
It'd be awesome. Oh, well, maybe we can be little pocket sharks floating around together, and Jillian can have fun in her warm tropical waters. But yes, cool. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I've really loved chatting to you both. And excited to see what comes next for you.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, well, thanks so much for having us.
So guys, that is a wrap on episode 1. Thank you so much for listening. I really hope you enjoyed the episode. And a massive thank you to Jillian and Jenny for coming on the podcast and chatting shark reproduction with me. You can find Jillian on @BiminiSharkGirl and Jenny on @SharkyJenny on both Instagram and Twitter. If you like this episode, be sure to subscribe so that you don't miss the next one, and leave us a nice little review on iTunes. This just helps more people to find us. And if you would like a question answered on the podcast, or you just want to say hi, please feel free to get in touch by emailing Isla, that's ISLA, @saveourseas.com. A big thank you to the Save Our Seas Foundation for supporting this podcast, and to David Knight, who provided our wonderful jingle. All right, thanks for listening, and I will see you next time.